"Mom, the keys don't work." Helen didn't flinch. She was holding the deed. Taylor shrieked into the Ring camera, "You can't do this to your own family." "Please contact your lawyer or mine," Helen replied. Inside, the locksmith changed the last lock. Outside, her son pounded the door like a stranger. "All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from." The car pulled away before I even made it to the front door. I was early, 40 minutes, maybe more, but I needed to see something before they prepared it. That instinct that stirs when you know the smile waiting for you might be too smooth. The ramp was gone. So was my wheelchair. My heart stuttered as my fingers gripped the cold brick on the porch rail. The sunlight hit differently here now. Too harsh, like the house itself had squinted and turned its face away. I stared at the 4 shallow steps leading to the door I used to call mine. Inside, I could already hear her voice. The door opened before I could knock. Taylor stood in the doorway with a smile too white, too fast. She looked like a receptionist greeting a client, not a daughter-in-law welcoming family home. "Oh, you're early," she said, stepping aside like I was just another delivery she didn't ask for. "We thought you'd be here after noon." "I caught an earlier ride," I said, breath short. My voice rasped from the dust and the weight of the moment. No one moved to help me up the steps. Taylor watched me with her head tilted, perfectly made-up face showing zero panic. "We made some changes while you were in rehab. Cleared some of the clutter to help you feel less dependent." I blinked. "Where's the ramp?" "Oh, it was such an eyesore." She laughed a little too brightly. "Peter said you were walking again, so we figured progress, right?" I didn't reply. Just stared past her shoulder into the place that used to be mine. Something smelled different inside. Not bad. Just foreign. Like a scentless candle and floor polish trying to mask something permanent. My hands ached as I lifted one foot onto the step. The other shook. She watched me struggle, offering neither help nor apology. "You can use the handrail," she added, like it was a new feature she'd kindly installed. Inside, the floors gleamed. The carpet was gone. A thin, expensive-looking runner stretched down the hallway like a red carpet to nowhere. Furniture had been moved. The recliner wasn't by the window anymore. The rug Harold and I bought in Santa Fe had vanished. In its place, something minimalist, cold, and gray. The walker I'd used during my last weeks at rehab was nowhere in sight. "Where's my walker?" I asked. Taylor's expression didn't shift. "It's in the garage, I think, behind the Christmas stuff. You won't need it, though. You're doing great." Peter walked in just then, holding his phone. He looked up, startled. "Mom, you're here." "Barely," I said. He looked at Taylor, then quickly down. "She meant well," he mumbled. I said nothing. My legs burned, hips locking with strain as I took another step. I knew if I paused, I wouldn't move again. It took me nearly 10 minutes to get to my recliner. The only thing left untouched, now shoved into the corner like a piece of outdated equipment. When I finally dropped into it, my chest heaved with the effort. No one offered water. No one sat beside me. I stayed there until the pain dulled into a throb, until Taylor retreated into the kitchen and Peter disappeared into his office. Then I heard it. Taylor's voice, low but clear from the hallway behind the kitchen, leaking through the air vent like poison. "I mean, come on. It's like living with a tenant. But not for long." I didn't breathe, didn't blink. I just stared at the pristine walls, the polished floors, the clean lines of a house where comfort used to live, and felt every bone in my body settle into something heavier than pain. This wasn't care. It was erasure. She overhears Taylor say on the phone, "It's like living with a tenant." But not for long. The chair wasn't in the garage, not behind the holiday boxes, not beside the gardening tools, not anywhere. Helen's hands trembled, not from weakness, but from knowing. She didn't yell. She walked back into the kitchen slowly, each step echoing against the cold tile that had replaced the rug Harold once called the house's heartbeat. Taylor was at the counter, slicing an avocado with surgeon's precision. She looked up with that same sugary smile that had worn thin by the minute. "My wheelchair," Helen said. "Where is it?" Taylor didn't pause. Didn't even blink. Oh, that old thing? We donated it, local clinic, they were thrilled. Helen stared at her. You donated it? Mm-hmm, Taylor chirped, scooping green flesh into a porcelain bowl. It looked so depressing just sitting in the garage. You're walking again, aren't you proud? That chair was custom fitted. Her voice was low but taut. It wasn't a thrift store find. Taylor Law ugged lightly, like Helen had complimented her blouse instead of accused her of theft. You were only in it for a few months, Helen. We didn't think… We? She cut in. Or you? Peter's footsteps approached from the hallway. What's going on? He asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes like he hadn't just ignored her for 24 hours. Your wife gave away my wheelchair, Helen said, turning to him. Peter shifted his weight and scratched the back of his neck. She said you wouldn't need it. It's just a misunderstanding. Helen stared at him. I paid for that chair. Myself. Every dime. Medicare wouldn't cover the model I needed. Peter raised his hand slightly, a gesture of tired surrender. Look, it's gone now, okay? Can we just not make this into something it's not? Something it's not? Helen turned away. That's when she noticed it. Right there on the side table where her family photos had once stood. Now there was a ceramic sculpture shaped like a spiral, minimalist, white, cold. She stepped into the living room. Her framed pictures, her graduation from the teaching program, Harold in his army uniform, her and Peter on the swings when he was 5. Gone. In their place, a curated display of muted tones, abstract shapes, and gold-accented books with uncracked spines. Like a furniture catalog had moved in and evicted her life. Where are my photos? She asked, her voice quieter now. The ones from the mantel? Oh, Taylor called from the kitchen. I put them in the closet. I'm redoing the space. Less clutter, more intention. Helen didn't reply. She didn't trust her voice not to break. Instead, she walked, slowly, carefully, down the hall toward what used to be her room. When she opened the guest door, the smell of lavender spray hit her hard. The bed had been redressed with a white comforter. Everything looked so clean, so impersonal. Her suitcase sat zipped in the corner, untouched. She moved toward the closet. No chair, no walker. Her winter coat shoved to one side. Boxes she didn't recognize stacked along the floor. Something else was wrong. Her fingers moved instinctively to the old cedar jewelry box that should have been on the dresser. She spotted it finally, on the nightstand beside a glass bowl filled with scented stones. She opened the box. Empty. The place where Harold's cufflinks had sat for decades, bare. Her gold locket, gone. Her mother's ruby pin from the 40s, nothing left but the red velvet lining, stained in the corners and hollow at the center. Her knees nearly gave, but she caught herself on the edge of the bed. The air felt too still, like the house had stopped breathing. Down the hall she could hear Taylor laughing at something on her phone. Peter's voice, low and dismissive. Helen looked at the empty box, then out the window to the street beyond. This wasn't just disrespect. It was extraction. Helen finds her jewelry box in the guest room. Empty. The first red flag wasn't the missing bed, it was the Wi-Fi. Helen stared at her phone, blinking as the network list refreshed. Lang House Guest hovered weakly at the bottom. The home network she used to log into, Helen's Nest, was gone. She tapped refresh again, futilely, like repetition would undo the insult. A hollow unease bloomed beneath her ribs. She moved slowly down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. When she reached the door to her bedroom, the one Harold had painted sky blue decades ago, her hand trembled on the knob. She turned it. The bed was gone. So was the dresser. So were the lace curtains she'd hemmed by hand, the quilt she'd stitched during Peter's senior year of high school, and the photo of her and Harold laughing at Niagara Falls. In their place, a Peloton bike, a full-length mirror, floor-to-ceiling yoga mats. A ring light sat in the corner, dumbbells lined the wall, and mounted above the closet, a neon sign that said, "Sweat now, shine later." Helen's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back like the room itself had slapped her. Her things, her life, had been erased, not moved, not boxed, just overwritten. The faint scent of eucalyptus wafted through the air, mixed with the plasticky tang of new rubber. Somewhere, a speaker played a lo-fi workout playlist that pulsed faintly through the wall. She turned away and headed for the laundry room. There, behind a stacked washer and dryer, her suitcases were crammed beneath a folding table. Her sweaters were half unzipped in a soft-sided duffel. Her bathrobe hung crooked on a hook, usually reserved for a broom. Her pillow was on top of the dryer, still bearing the faint imprint of her head. Footsteps. Then Peter's voice. "Oh, hey, Mom," he said, voice casual, too casual. "I was just coming to check on you." Helen didn't turn around. Peter glanced at the suitcases. "We're just reorganizing a bit. Taylor thought it might be nice for you to be around the action. Keep you energized. You know, movement promotes healing." Helen faced him. Her eyes were dry, but her voice was like flint. "Is that what this is? Healing?" Peter shifted. "It's just temporary. Once the remodel's done, we'll make you a really nice space, modern, accessible. Taylor has ideas." "I'm sure she does," Helen said, brushing her hand across a blanket that now smelled like dryer sheets instead of cedar. That evening, dinner was tofu lasagna, Taylor's latest recipe for gut health. They ate at the glass dining table Helen had once covered with floral linen and real dishes, now stripped to cold minimalism. "So," Taylor said brightly between bites, "I'm officially launching my design site next week. This house is my portfolio now. I've been documenting all the changes, before and afters, the whole thing." Peter nodded like a nod was participation. Helen chewed in silence, her fork grazing the plate. "No one's doing wellness-focused interiors for multi-gen homes," Taylor continued, voice rising with pride. "We're actually blending healing and aesthetics. It's pioneering work." Helen set her fork down. "You mean like removing my bedroom?" Taylor blinked as if the interruption were off script. "It's a shared space, Helen. You always say you want to be part of things." Peter cleared his throat. "Let's just focus on dinner." Afterward, Helen wheeled herself, her old walker still missing, to the laundry room. She sat beside the dryer and pulled out her phone. She typed slowly. "Text to Martha. Something's wrong here. I feel like a ghost." She stared at the screen. The text showed delivered, but no dots, no reply. Helen set the phone down and picked it up again, clicking on her banking app out of habit. Just to check, just to feel some semblance of control. A spinning wheel. Then, "Login expired. Account access denied. Please contact customer service." Helen's chest went still. That was her money, her name, her independence. Now it was missing too. Helen's bank app login no longer works. Peter wouldn't meet her eyes. That, more than anything, told Helen everything she needed to know. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded tightly across her chest, not out of anger, but to hold herself in one piece. The dishes from dinner sat in the sink, untouched. Outside the window, dusk melted into the trees, their branches swaying like they knew something she didn't. "Can we talk?" she asked. Peter didn't look up from his phone. "Sure, if it's quick." She walked slowly to the kitchen table, the ache in her joints louder than usual. "I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." He exhaled, setting his phone down with a sigh that sounded far too practiced. "Mom, if this is about the room again—" "No," she cut in. "This is about my chair, my account, and everything else that's been disappearing since I came home." Peter scratched his neck. "You're making it sound like we're plotting against you. You haven't answered my calls from rehab in weeks. I come home to a house I barely recognize. I'm sleeping next to a washing machine, and now my bank app doesn't work." She leaned forward. "Did you lock me out of my own account?" Peter finally looked at her. Just for a second. It was long enough to make her stomach turn. "There were some issues," he said, the words brittle. "Taylor thought it was best to keep things consolidated while you were in recovery." "My name was on that account before either of you had a mortgage," Helen said, voice sharp. "And you know it." Peter ran a hand through his hair. "It's just temporary, Mom. You're acting like it's permanent." "It feels permanent, especially when my bedroom becomes a gym and my photos are replaced with plants in gold pots." He scoffed lightly. "Come on, Taylor's just trying to make it feel less heavy around here. Less like me, she corrected. She even changed the Wi-Fi name. Peter bristled. So what if she did? We've been under a lot of stress too, you know. It's not easy having someone else in the house full time. I'm not someone else, Helen said quietly. I'm your mother. You were? Peter muttered, then instantly regretted it. He opened his mouth as if to take it back, but Helen had already stepped back like the air itself had slapped her. She stood still for a beat too long, then turned and walked away without a word. Upstairs, the laundry room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the water heater behind the wall. Helen sat on the edge of the folded-out cot and stared at the half-empty duffel bag that now held what was left of her independence. She breathed deeply through her nose. Then she stood, slowly, carefully. She moved toward the hallway closet, the one where her private files had always been kept. The top shelf was now filled with yoga mats and pastel bins labeled seasonal. She reached behind them, her fingers feeling for the thin black binder where she'd kept her house deed and power of attorney documents. Gone. She didn't panic. Not outwardly. Instead, she moved methodically to the small bin near the laundry trash, lifting the lid, sifting through. Torn packaging and junk mail. Then she saw it. A corner of thick parchment envelope ripped clean through the center. Her name was visible in the return address window. Below it, the faded blue logo of her attorney's firm. A tear sliced directly across the name. William R. Edwards, Esquire. Helen froze, the sound of her pulse in her ears like a ticking clock. What else had they tried to erase? Her hand trembled, but not from age, from awareness. In the trash, she finds a torn envelope with her attorney's name on it. The chair was one thing, the deed was another. They could replace furniture, repaint walls, rename Wi-Fi. But that house, my house, still had my name on the title, printed in ink no amount of disregard could scrub clean. Helen didn't pack much. Just a small tote, her wallet, a folder of paperwork, and the worn blue sweater Nadine had once gifted her after a bad surgery. She left early, before sunrise, and didn't say a word to Peter or Taylor. The house was quiet, still wrapped in sleep and pretense. She didn't even bother to close the front door softly. The cold morning air stung her face as she stepped into the rideshare car. The driver glanced in the mirror. "Everything all right, ma'am?" Helen smiled without showing her teeth. "It's getting there." Nadine's house was tucked behind a bakery and a dentist's office in an aging cul-de-sac. It smelled like cinnamon, lemon polish, and paperwork, exactly how Helen remembered it. The door creaked open before she even knocked. "You look like someone who's got facts and fury," Nadine said, arms already open. Helen stepped in, the warmth flooding over her like proof that something was still safe somewhere. "You've got coffee, right?" "Always." They sat at the small kitchen table, stacks of manila folders nearby, a half-dead peace lily in the window. Nadine had once been the sharpest paralegal in 2 counties, and retirement hadn't dulled her instinct. It had just given her more time to aim. "So," Nadine said, cracking her knuckles, "what are we taking back today?" Helen pulled out the ripped envelope with her attorney's name half torn, then a printed page from her financial account summary, still partially locked. "First," Helen said, "we check the county site. If I'm still on that deed, we move." Nadine tapped a few keys, her nails clicking like a metronome. "Remind me of the parcel number?" Helen recited it by memory. The screen loaded. Nadine's eyebrows rose. "Sole owner, Helen Grace Miller. Status? Active, no liens, no cosigners." Helen let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Taylor submitted a forged co-ownership request, didn't she?" "Yup." Nadine scrolled further. "And look at this. Application denied. Signature verification failed. This was dated 2 weeks ago, while you were still in rehab." Helen's fingers curled around her mug. "They really thought I wouldn't look." "Oh, it gets better." Nadine opened another tab, this one a credit bureau dashboard she still had access to through her old firm. "We're locking your credit today. No new cards, no loans, no funny business." Helen nodded. "And revoking any assumed power of attorney, even if it was never formal, I want it in writing." "Smart woman." Nadine pulled out a template and began typing. By noon, they had emailed Helen's bank, restored her account access, and filed a formal request with the county to flag any future title changes for manual review. They sealed copies of everything into a red accordion folder labeled SECUREACTION in Nadine's precise handwriting. Then Helen did one more thing. She set her phone timer. 72 hours, she said aloud. That's all I'm giving them. After that, I'm gone. Nadine paused. Gone how? I'll explain later. Right now, I just need to move quietly. Nadine's face softened. You still believe they'll change? Helen looked out the window. But I believe in the version of me that forgot she had choices, and I don't want to be her anymore. Nadine reached for another file but stopped when something on the screen blinked. Wait. Helen turned. This doesn't look right, Nadine said, scrolling fast. There's a mortgage pre-approval request submitted under Peter's name 3 days ago. What? Helen sat up straighter. And he listed your house as collateral, tried to pull a $160,000 line of credit. Helen stared, the air turning still around her. He filed without ownership. That's fraud, Nadine added. Helen didn't blink, didn't fume. Her voice came out quiet, almost surgical. Then he won't see it coming when the collateral walks out. Helen says flatly, then he won't see it coming when the collateral walks out. Before I left, I needed to see what they were really like when they thought I couldn't hear them, not just what they said to my face, but what they whispered when they thought the house itself was deaf. Helen moved like fog. Quiet, measured, deliberate. She waited until Peter left for his office downtown, and Taylor left for what she called consults, but usually involved overpriced lattes and mood board selfies. Then, with her hands still slightly swollen from arthritis, Helen pulled the old nanny cam from its dusty box in the garage, wedged behind a broken humidifier and what remained of her sewing machine cover. It was small, the kind you clip to a bookshelf or nestle into fabric. She'd used it once to keep an eye on her granddaughter in the playroom years ago. Now it had a different purpose entirely. She tested it. The red light blinked once, still working. One went into the corner of the living room, tucked between decorative books Taylor had arranged strictly by color, not content. The second, smaller cam, she carefully hid inside her sewing basket, which had been placed, ironically, inside what used to be her bedroom, the room where her name was no longer spoken. That night, Helen pretended to be asleep early, her bedroom door shut, her presence muted. The house creaked, stretched, whispered, and so did they. I just don't understand why it's taking so long, Peter muttered in the living room. I sent in everything. The refi was supposed to go through before she got home. Taylor's voice came sharper, like ice hitting glass. Because she's still on the deed, genius. The bank flagged your name like it's an unauthorized user trying to hack the system. Peter sighed. I thought you submitted the co-ownership form. I did, but they said the signature was inconsistent, Taylor snapped. She barely writes anymore. I figured no one would question it. Helen sat still in the laundry room, the blue light of her phone reflecting off her glasses as the live feed played quietly in her lap. She barely breathed. You know what? Taylor continued, throwing herself onto the couch. She's furniture with medical needs. That's it. She just exists here. No contribution, no help, just guilt and prescriptions. Peter mumbled something, unintelligible. Taylor didn't stop. This place should be ours. She can't even walk properly. What's she going to do? Sue us? The laughter that followed sounded brittle, cheap. The next night brought more of the same. Taylor telling a friend over speakerphone that the old woman is a vibe killer and how she had a vision board full of minimalist renovations. We'll turn it into something sleek, like those open-plan retirement homes. Just no old people. Peter chimed in later, pacing by the kitchen. I didn't sign up to be a nurse. I signed up for support. She's taking up the whole goddamn story arc of our life. Helen didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She watched, recorded, filed. And when the final clip captured Taylor walking into the living room, fanning out paint swatches across the coffee table and saying, "When she's gone, we'll finally gut this place," Helen quietly removed the USB from the laptop, labeled it knitting patterns, and slid it into her purse beside a small envelope labeled Deed Verified Copy. She picked up the phone. It rang twice. Then Martha's voice, "Helen?" "I need a pickup," Helen said calmly. "No questions. I'll explain later." There was a pause, then a car engine in the background. "I'll be there by 9. Helen closed the call, exhaled deeply, and let the air around her settle like dust after demolition. The kind you don't see until the light hits it just right. Taylor walks into the living room with paint swatches and says, "When she's gone, we'll finally gut this place." I left in silence, like a woman escaping a crime scene she didn't commit. The house had a pulse when it was angry. Doors slammed harder, shoes tapped louder, the kettle screamed longer than it needed to. But tonight, it was still, not peaceful, just paused, like a stage waiting for someone to forget their next line. Helen feigned exhaustion after dinner, as she'd done the past few nights. "I think I'll turn in early," she murmured, the corners of her mouth drooping into a practiced fatigue. Her hand grazed her side as she winced, just enough to draw Peter's casual concern. "You okay?" he asked without looking away from his phone. "Just tired," she said. "The laundry room's quieter anyway." Taylor, already half absorbed in a conversation about maximizing light flow on her Zoom call, gave a distracted wave. "Rest up." Helen shuffled into the laundry room, closing the door with a whisper instead of a click. Her hands moved faster than her feet now. She reached behind the shelf where Nadine had hidden the foldable travel chair, lightweight, inconspicuous, a godsend with wheels. She sat, took one last look at the pale blue walls, and pushed off. The house creaked softly, but no voices followed. Peter was in his gaming headset, grunting at strangers online. Taylor's fake laugh bounced from the home office as she pitched her designed-for-comfort home layout to someone who didn't know she'd exiled her own mother-in-law to a room with detergent and bleach. Helen moved slowly through the back hallway, bypassing the entryway rug, where her wedding photo used to hang. She didn't look at the bare wall. At the counter, she left only one thing, a cold teacup, the rim still faintly smudged with lipstick. Outside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of early rain. A breeze whispered through the hedges as a set of headlights pulled into the driveway without sound. Martha stepped out, keys in hand, sweater sleeves rolled up, like she had no time for second thoughts. "You look calm," she said as Helen opened the car door. Helen paused, eyes forward. "I am," she said, "because they think I'm still inside." They didn't speak again until the turn signal clicked at the edge of the neighborhood. Martha glanced over. "You're sure about this?" Helen nodded, gripping the USB in her pocket labeled knitting patterns. "I've been sure since the minute they erased my ramp." That night, at Martha's house, Helen settled into the guest room with a sense of direction she hadn't felt in months. The air smelled like lavender and floor polish. Her old quilt lay folded at the edge of the bed, the same one her mother had given her the year Peter was born. Everything here had memory, but none of it felt stolen. She opened her laptop at 11:47 p.m., logged in with the credentials she'd restored last week, and opened the template Nadine had sent her. Eviction notice, official termination of unauthorized occupancy. Her fingers moved steadily. Property address, dates, signature, notarized documents already attached. She double-checked the deed, her name, still the only one there. At exactly midnight, she clicked submit through the court filing portal. The confirmation screen glowed back at her. Document received, time-stamped. She leaned back, breath steady, heart not racing. It wasn't revenge, it was relief. Cool and quiet, like water finally seeping under a sealed door. The house she'd bought, maintained, lived in, and loved had become a museum curated by people who didn't care if she ever walked its halls again. And yet, they forgot one thing. She still owned the floor beneath them. At midnight, Helen files the official eviction notice, with herself as sole property owner. I sat in Martha's spare room and made a list of everything Taylor ever called unnecessary. The bed creaked softly beneath Helen as she shifted, the paper on her lap folding at the corners from how tightly she held the pen. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus and old books, a comforting contrast to the sterilized, candle-scented showroom her home had been turned into. She wrote in firm, unshaking lines, "Wheelchair, custom titanium frame, too bulky, wedding photo, mantle, too sentimental, memory quilt, sofa, outdated bookcase with her nursing school books, crowding the aesthetic." Each item had once held meaning. Now each had been reduced to a label: clutter. Helen's jaw clenched. Across the room, Martha sat in the armchair beside the window, flipping through the mail with quiet purpose. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. "I already did," Helen replied. "I just haven't mailed it yet." She reached for her tablet and tapped through the folder labeled Reclaims. Inside were screenshots, her online bank restored, her identity protection account showing green. Her nephew, Anthony, a probate and estate lawyer, had filed the power of attorney revocation 2 days prior. The signature had felt more liberating than walking again. "They boxed up my life to make space for their ambitions," Helen said. "Now I'm unboxing it." She walked to Martha's printer and retrieved the freshly printed photos, ones Taylor had tossed to replace with pastel abstract art. Harold smiling at a barbecue, her son Peter, age 5, muddy and grinning in a sandbox, a faded image of her mother, seated beside a young Helen holding a diploma. She framed them slowly, carefully, like patching pieces of herself back together. The voicemail icon blinked on her phone. She tapped it. Taylor's voice chirped through the speaker like sunshine slathered over acid. "Hey, Helen, just letting you know we've scheduled the new floors. Eek, so excited. Hope you're okay with carpet in the living room. Hardwood just doesn't feel as warm. Let me know if you have thoughts. Or not. We're moving fast." Helen stared at the phone. She didn't reply. She copied the message into her evidence folder, labeled Voicemail, Taylor, Floors. Later that evening, she sat at Martha's dining table with Anthony on speaker. "I'm helping because I love you," he said, "but also because this crap is more common than people think." "I know," she said. "I reviewed your eviction notice. It's solid. Make sure the delivery is documented. Martha, can you serve it in person?" "I'm ready," Martha said, already folding the letter into a stiff manila envelope. Helen leaned over and signed it in blue ink. "You are hereby given 7 days to vacate my home." The final sentence read, "All unauthorized modifications will be considered damages." She sealed it. No hesitation. "I've scheduled the locksmith," Helen said. "He'll meet me there next Friday." As they hung up, the quiet in the room felt different, charged. Not the brittle silence of being ignored. This silence was preparation. Then Martha gasped, "Oh my God! What?" She turned her phone screen to Helen. Taylor's Instagram story was playing. The camera panned across Helen's living room, once hers, now cleared of her recliner and bookcase. Taylor's voice floated through, saccharine and smug. "Major home reno coming. Bye-bye boring. Finally making the space mine." The caption read, "Number sign. Fresh start number sign, minimalist luxury number sign, MIL, makeover." Helen didn't blink. She picked up her cup of tea, took a sip, and said only one thing. She's about to find out what mine really means. Taylor posts a video on Instagram. "Major home reno coming. Finally making the space mine." 6 days left, and they still hadn't noticed I'd left the house, or their radar. The silence was a weapon now, and Helen wielded it with precision. From Martha's sun-dappled kitchen, she watched a kettle begin to rumble on the stove, while her laptop glowed beside a growing stack of printed receipts, screenshots, scanned statements, certified forms, all aligned like chess pieces she had moved while her opponents slept through their turn. The cursor blinked over her spreadsheet labeled Timeline of Events, Displacement, Financial Control, Asset Tampering. She took a slow sip of tea, chamomile with mint, comfort and clarity in a cup. The eviction notice had been sent the night before, tracked, signed for, irrefutable. She didn't need an argument. She had documentation. Now she watched and waited. Taylor's Instagram post was still gaining traction, 32,000 views, hundreds of comments, major home reno coming, finally making the space mine. Minimalist dream, mill makeover. Good vibes, only one commenter had written, "Wish I had a mill who paid my mortgage." Another added, "Manifesting this kind of inheritance." A third, "She's so lucky her in-laws are just ready to hand over the house." Helen tapped the post, saved it. Screenshot, logged into her file. Category, evidence of intent to claim ownership. Subheading, public declaration of occupancy without rights. She muttered under her breath as she saved the file. I wasn't paying her mortgage. I owned it. Behind her, Martha entered with a tray of biscuits and paused when she saw the post again. She really thought she had it all figured out. She still does, Helen said, voice steady, but the house has 6 days left of being confused. They shared a glance, equal parts grief and grit. At noon, Helen walked to the mailbox and retrieved the stamped envelope she'd been expecting. Confirmation from the county. Her power of attorney had been revoked. The property deed confirmed sole ownership, unchanged, untouchable. Taylor's attempt to forge co-ownership had been flagged and rejected. Helen smiled faintly. There it is. That afternoon, she scheduled a consultation with a real estate agent, not because she was ready to sell, but because power sometimes came from knowing your options. When the agent asked whether she'd prefer cash buyers or long-term lease, Helen said simply, "I'm just exploring." "Of course," the woman said, her tone respectful, if mildly curious. "May I ask why now?" Helen paused. "Because I've finally decided which parts of my life are still mine, and which aren't worth fighting for." By evening, her phone lit up with a call. Taylor. Helen let it ring twice before answering. "Where are you?" Taylor's voice was tight, too bright. "You scared us. We didn't know if something happened." "I'm safe," Helen said evenly. Taylor hesitated. "Okay, but where are you?" Helen's answer came calmly, almost kindly. "You'll know soon." She hung up before another word passed between them. 5 minutes later, her phone rang again. "Peter." She stared at the screen. Didn't move. Let it buzz once. Twice. Then picked it up and answered, saying nothing. "Mom?" His voice was breathless. "We got a letter. What is this?" The pause that followed wasn't cruel. It was exact. Helen inhaled once through her nose, held it, released it. Then she said, "Read it again. Out loud, if you must." I don't understand. Are you evicting us?" "You said the house wasn't mine anymore," she replied. "I'm simply correcting the misunderstanding. Can't we just talk?" "You never listened before," Helen said, "so I had to switch to paper." She ended the call. Outside, the wind picked up. A neighbor's wind chime clattered like applause. Peter calls next, not with concern, but panic. "We got a letter. What is this?" The locks changed at 10 a.m. By noon, they were calling like the house had caught fire. The click of the new deadbolt was softer than Helen expected. It didn't echo. It didn't thunder. It simply ended something. The locksmith stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. "All done, ma'am. You've got new codes on the keypad, and this," he held up a tiny silver remote, "will disable the garage from outside." Helen nodded, fingers curled around a folder stamped in red. Deed, Helen M. Lawrence. Her name, her initials, no cosigners, no doubts. Behind her, Officer Delgado stood quietly, arms crossed, eyes neutral. Required presence? Nothing more. But Helen appreciated the stillness he brought with him. It was a sharp contrast to what was coming. "Would you like me to stick around a few more minutes?" he asked gently. "No need," Helen said, voice calm. "They'll scream at the door, not through it." He tipped his hat. "Then you're all set. I'll log the time for my report." By 10:42 a.m., Helen was alone, and the house, her house, was finally hers again. She moved slowly, not from pain, but deliberation. She placed a folded note on the marble entry table. The words were handwritten in ink that did not smudge. "The house has been resecured. All access terminated. Items will be boxed for pickup. Helen." Then she took a deep breath. walked through each room, and opened the windows wide. Spring air spilled in, sweet with lilac and distant lawn clippings. Her recliner was back in its corner. Her framed photos, restored from Martha's car, were propped on the mantel, replacing Taylor's abstract art prints. The tea kettle sat on the stove like it had never left. At 11:59 a.m., the doorbell rang. Then again, and again. She didn't answer. Outside, Ring recorded the chaos. First, Peter's voice, strained, brittle. "Mom? Mom?" Then Taylor. Her tone was shrill. "What is this? Why won't the key work?" She pressed her face to the door camera, teeth bared like an animal against glass. "You can't do this. You can't." Helen pressed the mic button from her phone. Her voice came through the speaker like frost on a window pane. "Please contact your lawyer. Or mine." The phone calls began 2 minutes later. Peter first, Taylor next, Peter again, then blocked numbers, then voicemails, each more frantic than the last. "You're destabilizing the family," Peter yelled on one. "Do you want to be alone forever? Is that the plan?" She didn't reply with words. She forwarded him 2 video files and a set of audio clips. Taylor's voice in crystal clarity. "She's just furniture with medical needs." Peter's voice. "We deserve the house." Then, "What's she going to do? Sue us?" Helen added a single text beneath the files. "This is what family sounds like?" Then she turned off her phone. She made tea. She took a bath. She sat in silence. It was 4:13 p.m. when the first notification hit her inbox. TikTok. @Taylor Designs has tagged you in a post. She opened it with detached curiosity. The video was expertly lit, voiceover calm but urgent. Taylor's face filled the frame, eyes glossy with feigned grief. "I never thought I'd have to say this publicly," she began, "but my family is being torn apart. My elderly mother-in-law is being manipulated. She's confused. There's paperwork, yes, but there's also love. And she's being isolated by people who don't understand our dynamic. I just want her safe. I just want her home." The caption read, "This is elder abuse. Please help us raise awareness. Protect seniors. Core Family Matters." The comments were already pouring in. Some offered sympathy, some cried foul. But a few, just a few, said, "Didn't you say this was your house last week? Something about this doesn't add up. Where's the wheelchair she didn't need?" By nightfall, the video had 48,000 views. At 7:08 p.m., her phone buzzed again. A number she didn't recognize. Helen almost declined it, but something in her gut told her not to. "Mrs. Lawrence?" The woman's voice was professional, clipped but respectful. "This is Caitlin Holt from Channel 9. I've been reviewing a story circulating online. I was wondering if you'd be willing to comment on the record about the eviction and what led to it." Helen looked at the screen, out the window, back at the house she'd reclaimed. She didn't answer right away. The video gains traction, and a local reporter reaches out to Helen for comment. "They filmed a lie. I filed the paperwork." Helen didn't raise her voice, not once. Not when the TikTok hit 100,000 views, not when the hashtags started multiplying like weeds, and certainly not when Taylor appeared on another video tearfully claiming, "We built this home together." She just occupied it. Instead, Helen opened her laptop with hands that no longer trembled, the morning light pooling softly on Martha's spare room desk. The tea beside her had gone cold, but she didn't notice. Her cursor hovered over the folder she had labeled Receipts, House plus Hell. Inside, a scan of the deed, clearly listing Helen M. Lawrence as sole title holder. A certified letter revoking any assumed power of attorney. A dated logbook entry from the locksmith. Screenshots of Taylor's online interior design launch campaign using Helen's home as her first portfolio space. An email thread with the county office confirming Helen's sole ownership status, updated just last week, and a clip from the nanny cam where Taylor said she's furniture with medical needs. All of it was neatly zipped and renamed HL Statement Backup Fact Set.pdf. She clicked Compose and typed into the address bar Caitlin.Holt@channel9, localnews.com, subject Request for comment, Helen Lawrence body, Dear Ms. Holt, please find attached the documents supporting my sole ownership and recent legal actions regarding my property. I will agree to a brief interview on one condition. This cannot be a story about me alone. There are countless seniors erased by those claiming to protect them. I want their stories included too. Sincerely, Helen M. Lawrence. She attached the file, paused briefly, then hit send. By mid-afternoon, the reporter had replied with fewer pleasantries and more respect. Understood. Your documentation is comprehensive. We'd be honored to amplify your story properly. I've already pitched the segment, The Silent Evictions, When Inheritance Becomes Displacement. KH. Helen's lips curled into the subtlest smile. She reached for her tea, still cold, and drank it anyway. The wave came quietly at first, an email from a 74-year-old woman in Ohio who wrote, "My son sold my sewing machine on Facebook while I was still in the hospital. I thought I was crazy for being angry." Then came a subreddit. R just no DIL post title, MIL evicts DIL after they toss her wheelchair, goddess energy. Top comment. No one talks about how often women like her get erased in their own homes. She didn't snap. She corrected. Helen didn't reply to the thread. She just read each line, slowly, then closed the browser and sat back in the chair. "I don't need revenge," she murmured to Martha, who passed behind her with a load of laundry. "I need correction." Martha paused, nodded once, and continued on. That night, Taylor uploaded a second video. Better lit, professional makeup. She wore soft grays, her voice controlled. "This isn't about property," she said. "It's about respect. My husband and I built that house. My mother-in-law stayed with us. We included her. She occupied that space." A pause. A sniff. Now she's punishing us for taking care of her. Helen watched without flinching, then clicked record on her own phone, not for a video, not for theatrics, just one image, the deed. Her name on the title, underlined in pen, time-stamped, notarized, digital seal and all. She opened a new Instagram account. No filters, no bio, no hashtags. She uploaded the photo with only one caption. "I didn't occupy the space. I signed for it." The post went live at 9:14 p.m. By 9:16, comments had already begun. "Oh, well, that shuts it down. Queen of receipts." And beneath it, one message from a stranger in Montana. "You didn't just reclaim your house, you reclaimed the narrative." Helen posts a single image to her own new social media. The deed with her name, time-stamped. "I wasn't kicking them out. I was reclaiming what they pretended to gift me." Helen stood at the edge of her own driveway with her keys in one hand and her cane in the other, breathing in the quiet. The lawn had overgrown slightly. A dead potted succulent lay tipped by the porch. A strip of tape hung loose from a window where a "Coming Soon Taylor's Designs" sign had once clung. She exhaled, long, slow, and stepped forward. Each step up the ramp was deliberate, measured like punctuation, not hesitation. She wasn't fast, she wasn't flashy, but she was walking, and no one had to approve of that anymore. The front door groaned slightly when she unlocked it, a tiny detail, but hers now, fully and without contest. Inside, the smell hit her first. Not must, not mold, lemon, bleach, surface clean effort that didn't reach the bones of the place. It was tidy, but hollow. Taylor's neutral color palette had swallowed the home whole, white throws, abstract art, a rug that looked like it had never been stepped on. Helen didn't flinch. She didn't rush to undo it. She just moved through it, her cane tapping gently against the hardwood as she made her way into the living room. The first thing she did was pull the folded blanket from the back of the couch, one Taylor had picked out for texture. She replaced it with the quilt she and her late husband had chosen at a yard sale in 1982. The stitching had faded in places. The corners were fraying. It smelled like cedar and thyme. It smelled like home. Her recliner, the one Peter had shoved into the garage to make room, was rolled back into place with the help of the delivery service she'd scheduled from Martha's. The moment she sat in it, her body remembering the exact curve of its backrest, it felt like a flag being planted. She was here, and staying. In the next few hours, Helen restored the photos that had been boxed away: her graduation portrait, her late husband laughing in Bermuda shorts, Peter as a toddler in a bucket hat, and a faded Polaroid of her mother kneading dough, with flour up to her elbows. Her house had never been sterile. It had been storied. Taylor's stack of business cards were found in a kitchen drawer. Helen ran them once through her fingers, glossy, expensive, embossed with a font trying too hard to say class. Then she dropped them into the recycling bin without a word. By sunset, her inbox pinged. Peter. Mom, I know you're hurt, but please be reasonable. We made mistakes, but this is extreme. We're family. Helen stared at the message. She didn't type back right away. Instead, she scrolled to the earlier thread, his silence after the wheelchair, his "you were" when she'd reminded him she was his mother. She clicked reply, typed "I was reasonable for 2 years," and hit send. That night, she met with the property manager, young, sharp, and unapologetically efficient. Helen handed her a folder labeled "Lease Terms, Final." "I want it rented," she said. "Long-term tenants, good references, market rate." "Not selling?" the manager asked, surprised. "No," Helen said. "I'm keeping it. I just want the space to earn its own keep, like I always had to." The next morning, her lawyer emailed confirmation. The no-contact clause had been finalized and filed with her updated estate. Peter and Taylor could contest it in theory, but they'd be swimming against notarized tides. Helen sat by the window in her restored reading chair, sipping coffee that didn't taste bitter anymore. The wind shifted through the curtains gently, lifting the air like the house had exhaled too. The mailbox creaked at noon. A letter, handwritten. Return address, Peter Lang. Inside, a 2-page apology in looping cursive, a confession, a plea, mentions of pressure, of being manipulated, of not realizing until it was too late. At the bottom, a line underlined twice. "Please reconsider." Helen read it once, then again. Her eyes didn't water, but they didn't harden either. A letter arrives, from Peter, a handwritten apology, with a request, "Please reconsider." Apology? Or access attempt? I read the letter twice. It smelled more like panic than regret. Helen held the envelope in her lap for 10 full minutes before opening it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Peter's, looping and rushed, the kind he always used when trying to sound vulnerable. She slid it open with the dull edge of a butter knife. No fanfare, no softness. The paper inside was thick. Too thick for sincerity. "Mom," it began, "I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About how we let things get distorted. Taylor and I were under a lot of pressure. You moving in wasn't what we expected, but that's not your fault. It's ours for not adjusting better." She kept reading. Mentions of burnout, of stress, of feeling cornered. Words like empathy and forgiveness fluttered through the page like decorations pinned to a cracked wall. The closing line stuck like a thorn. "Please reconsider. Maybe we can start again." Helen folded the letter in half, then in half again. She didn't rip it, though the urge tugged at her fingers. Instead, she laid it on the counter beside the sugar jar, between the everyday and the forgotten. The next morning, she took it to her lawyer. Dina, sharp-eyed, silk-bloused, and never without a pen, read it silently. When she finished, she looked up and said only, "Do you want to respond?" Helen didn't answer right away. "Is that wise?" she asked instead. Dina shrugged. "Depends. Do you want clarity, or do you want peace? Because they don't always arrive in the same envelope." Helen exhaled. The air in the office felt cold and citrusy, like lemon wipes on glass. She could see her reflection faintly in the window behind Dina. Not sharp, but steady. "They say it was all just stress," she murmured. "But you don't accidentally remove someone's bedroom. You don't burn out into changing locks on their bank." Dina nodded. "You've already made the legal boundaries clear. You owe them nothing." Helen paused, then asked, "But would one sentence count as closure?" Dina gave a half smile. One sentence might be just the right amount of noise. That evening, Helen sat by her window with a legal pad. She didn't draft paragraphs. She wrote one clean sentence in firm black ink. You didn't forget me. You deleted me. She didn't mail it. Not yet. Instead, she folded it once and tucked it inside the same envelope Peter had sent, sealed again with a single paperclip. Temporary. Like a message not quite buried, but not shared either. Later that week, the local news aired a segment on retired women reclaiming space. The screen showed stock footage, wrinkled hands turning keys, faded house deeds, slow walks up familiar porches. Helen wasn't named, but the quotes were hers. I didn't evict my family. I simply moved back into the home they tried to rename. The reporter had asked permission for the quote. She'd agreed, anonymously. But even in anonymity, Helen felt the shift. That evening, her phone buzzed with a call from Martha. You're becoming a legend, you know, her sister chuckled. Someone in my quilting group recognized your kitchen backsplash on the news. Helen smiled into her tea. Let them guess. But not 24 hours later, a bigger shift came. Dina called. You're going to want to hear this, she said. Helen adjusted the volume and set her tea down. Taylor just got served a cease and desist. Helen blinked. For what? Fraud. A former client. Apparently, she took payment for a renovation that never happened, used your address as a business reference. Helen sat back. The silence in her kitchen wasn't empty. It rang like a bell being struck. So this is a pattern, she murmured. It wasn't just me. No, Dina said. You weren't the first, but it looks like you might be the last. Later that night, her phone rang again. Unknown number. A voice came through the speaker, measured, polite, too careful to be casual. Ms. Lang, this is Natalie Chen from Channel 4. We understand your story might go deeper than we initially thought. Helen said nothing. I'd like to ask, would you be willing to go on record now? The reporter calls Helen. Would you like to go on record now? I used to stare out the window waiting for someone to come home. Now I wave goodbye from it. Helen stood at the front window, not hidden behind the curtain like she used to be, but fully visible. The morning light poured through the glass, soft and warm, catching the silver at her temples and making it gleam like intention. Outside, the street was quiet, save for a delivery van passing, the faint sound of a dog barking down the block, and the metallic clatter of someone dragging their trash bin too hard against the curb. She sipped her tea. No trembling. No hurry. This was the same window where she had once sat for hours, aching for Peter to look less tired, for Taylor to greet her with anything that felt like family. She used to count cars, to squint through glass, hoping the house would shift back into something familiar. Now, she wasn't hoping. She was remembering, on her terms. The reporter had come that morning, Natalie Chen, small-framed but sharp-eyed, voice smooth like velvet with edges. Whatever you're comfortable sharing, Natalie had said, setting down the recorder. We're not looking for villains, just the truth. Helen gave her a smile that didn't waver. The truth has enough teeth without me sharpening it. They sat in the reading room, sunlight slicing across the wood floor in diagonal stripes. Harold's photo was back on the mantel. Her recliner had returned to its place. Taylor's white orchid centerpiece had been replaced with a crooked ceramic bowl Helen had made in a community class decades ago. Everything was as it should be, not perfect, but hers. She didn't say their names during the interview, not once, but she told the story plainly, about the missing wheelchair, the invisible rooms, the locked bank account, the laugh behind the hallway door when she'd fallen. She recounted each detail not as an attack, but as evidence of something broader, quieter, crueler. I wasn't just erased, she said at one point. I was rewritten, as inconvenient. Natalie blinked hard, as if the words had landed somewhere deeper than expected. And now? Helen looked directly into the lens. Now I'm holding the pen. The piece aired the next evening on local news and was uploaded online before midnight. By morning, Helen's inbox was full, not with apologies but with echoes. This was me too. They told me to be grateful I had a room. I walked away and never looked back. Some were signed only with initials, some with usernames that hinted at daughters, mothers, aunts, but every message felt like a hand on Helen's shoulder. Not pity, recognition. By Thursday, Peter and Taylor were gone. No formal goodbye, no confrontation. She knew the move-out happened in stages. She'd seen them come and go over 3 days, Taylor in oversized sunglasses even at dusk, Peter carrying boxes with more silence than effort. They left behind an unpaid utility bill, a patch of carpet burned from a careless iron, and a jagged scratch down the hallway wall, like a final parting shot disguised as clumsiness. Helen didn't flinch. She documented everything. She mailed the bill to Peter's new apartment with a copy of the signed lease and a note that read, "Closure includes responsibility." Then she hired a contractor to reinstall the front ramp, not because she needed it, but because the next person might. It was her home again, and now it was a home for memory, not maintenance. She installed cameras, not for security, but for story. A way to record things as they were, not as someone else might edit them later. On Sunday, she stepped into the garden with a small trowel and a half-flat of marigolds. Her knees creaked, but her steps were steady. She knelt in the soil under the front window, the same one she used to wait behind, and dug shallow, even holes. She planted each flower, slowly, pressing them into the dirt like declarations. Yellow, bright, unapologetic. She was patting down the final mound when the mail truck stopped at her box. The driver gave a cheerful wave. She returned it. Inside the mailbox, nestled between a real estate brochure and a community event flyer, was a single envelope. White, formal, embossed in the corner with the name of Taylor's attorney. She opened it calmly. No shaking hands, just a glance, and then a long, slow breath. Client intends to dispute the terms of asset control. Helen stared at the words. Her jaw didn't clench. Her chest didn't tighten. She simply smiled. A letter arrives from Taylor's lawyer. Client intends to dispute the terms of asset control. They took my chair to shrink my space. I used my signature to expand it. The envelope sat unopened on Helen's kitchen table for 2 full hours before she slid the butter knife beneath the flap. She already knew what it would say. Not because she was clairvoyant, but because it reeked of the same desperation that had dripped from every smile Taylor had ever offered her. Saccharine, calculated, and entirely cosmetic. The letter was filled with legal terms meant to intimidate: alleged emotional distress, unjust property retention, contested rights of contribution. But when her lawyer, Carl, read it over at his desk, glasses perched on the tip of his nose, the corner of his mouth twitching, he set it down with a quiet chuckle. "No grounds," he said, "just noise dressed in stationery." Helen nodded. "So we ignore it?" "We document it," Carl replied, sliding the letter into a file labeled Post-Eviction Communications, "and we move forward." Forward. That was a word that had meant something different not long ago. It used to mean loss, compromise. Swallowing her pride and pretending not to notice her name being erased from Wi-Fi networks, family photos, financial accounts. But now? Now it meant choosing what stayed, what grew, what she gave away, and what she never allowed back in. Carl handed her a second document. Updated estate plan. This adds Peter and Taylor to the Do Not Contact clause and formally strips them from any power of attorney assumptions going forward. She took the pen. Signed without hesitation. "You're sure about this?" he asked. Helen met his gaze. "I was sure the moment my chair disappeared." Back home, she stood in the middle of the now quiet house, the late afternoon sun filtering through the window and painting gold across her rug, not the tasteless gray monstrosity Taylor once ordered. She could hear the hum of the fridge, the soft chirp of a bird outside the kitchen window, and her own heartbeat, steady, unshaken. Her phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Scholarship deposit. Today, 3 p.m. She smiled. From the rental income on the house, Helen had funded a small educational initiative through the local library. A modest sum, but enough for 5 adult learners to receive laptops, internet service, and accessibility accommodations for their night classes. It wasn't charity, it was restitution. She named the fund after her mother, a woman who had raised 3 kids during war and widowhood, who once told Helen during a low moment, "Don't be afraid to take the last word, if it's yours." And this one was. At the community center, Helen stepped carefully into the auditorium, her cane in one hand, her posture unbent. She wore navy slacks, her best cardigan, and a silver brooch that had belonged to her grandmother, a quiet kind of armor. A librarian named Marta greeted her with a paper program and a wide, grateful smile. "Thank you again, Mrs. Lang. Your gift made all this possible." Helen nodded. "Thank my mother. I just signed her name where she'd have written it." As she took a seat in the front row, the hum of voices and laughter filled the space. One girl, maybe 10 years old, rolled up beside her in a pink wheelchair decked out with glitter tape and stickers that said things like "Zoom Queen" and "Watch Me Roll." The girl pointed a small finger. "Are you the house story lady?" Helen blinked, startled. "I'm sorry?" "My aunt showed me the video. She said you kicked out the bad ones and got strong again." Helen laughed. Gently, not mockingly, but with a joy that hadn't bubbled up in years. "I'm not the house story, sweetheart." She reached forward and tapped the girl's name badge, LISA, in bold purple marker. "I'm the house." The girl beamed. Later that evening, Helen returned home to find a single letter in her mailbox. An ad for life insurance, ironically. She tossed it into the recycling bin, unlocked her door, and stepped inside. The photos were back on the walls. Her chair by the window was exactly where she liked it. The ramp had been reinstalled just yesterday, not because she needed it anymore, but because the next version of her might. She lit a candle in the kitchen, chamomile and clove, her favorite. She stood in the center of her home and whispered to no one in particular. "They threw away my wheelchair." She looked down at the polished hardwood floor. The light shifted across it like the past giving way. Then she smiled. "So I wheeled away with the deed, and I never looked back."